CGTN followers, we're coming to you live here from St. Petersburg in Russia. My name is Angela and welcome to all our CGTN followers on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Weibo and our CGTN app. And today I'm joined here by Mike from Anglo Turismo as well.
Hello,
and
everybody.
the reason why we're here is for the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, which is happening from the 6th to the 8th this week. But before the main event starts, we have a bit of time to explore this amazing city, which is also dubbed the cultural capital of the world. So before we start, maybe Mike, you can introduce to our audiences and our viewers what we have around us.
Well, around us we have St. Petersburg. At the moment we're right in the heart of this city. We're standing on an iconic bridge in St. Petersburg called the Palace Bridge that got its name from the Winter Palace. Right there, the green and white building over there with all those statues is the Winter Palace. St. Petersburg has over 100 palaces, but this is the most famous. This is the main palace, was built for the Russian royal family in the mid-18th century and now is a part of the State Hermitage Museum.
Wow. I think it's one of the biggest museum or largest museum in the world.
Well, it's still debated which one is larger, the Louvre or the State Hermitage of St. Petersburg, but with its 3.2 million exhibits, thousands of square meters of exhibition space, it probably makes it at least one of the two largest.
Yeah. That's incredible. And also we can see here we're on the bridge and it's the Neva River. Am I pronouncing that right?
In Russian they would say Neva.
Neva.
In English that's correct, that's the Neva, and this is the main river here in town.
Yeah. And this flows to the Baltic, and I think earlier we were talking about this river actually goes all the way to Iran as well.
Well, technically it starts from a big lake east of St. Petersburg called Lake Ladoga, but it is possible if you follow this waterway, it is possible to catch a boat to the Caspian Sea, yes.
Wow. So maybe soon we'll have one of those tours from you guys.
Well, yes, why not? Yeah, keeping my fingers crossed.
Yeah. And great, and here we can see, even though we're standing on the bridge already, but just a bit ahead of us we can see another bridge, and also there's a lot of bridges behind us as well. And I think in St. Petersburg there's somewhat 800 bridges here. And
well, in St. Petersburg and Greater St. Petersburg there is about 700 bridges.
Wow.
In what is called the city there is about 350.
Wow.
There are 23 bridges on the main river and 21 of them are drawbridges. Every night at about 20 past 1 a.m.
Yeah.
all these bridges go up, 21 bridges go up, and it's a pretty awesome view. Well, there's a kind of a subculture in St. Petersburg. It's not just for the tourists. Young people like to come to this particular bridge because this is the main bridge, and when you see the bridge go up, well, people bring beers, click the glasses or click the bottles and make a wish, and well, at least it brings you luck for the rest of the year. But this is something that you're supposed to do once a year.
Oh wow, but every night they'll come up, so all 21 bridges will draw up
Yes.
And will there be a ceremony or countdown, or?
There's no ceremony of countdown, no, because the timetable of the bridge opening depends on the traffic. It depends on the number of barges that are scheduled to sail up and down every night, and every night it's a different number.
Wow.
Well, but we know approximately 120, 125, so you can know pretty much exactly when the bridges will go up, and it's a great view. And some people like to do it from the boats because the boats go under the bridges go up. It's pretty awesome.
Wow, so our viewers, if you hear this very bridge that we're standing on, the Palace Bridge, will also draw up. So it's very much like the Linden Bridge that we have in the UK as well. So if you guys are here visiting St. Petersburg, you have to check that out. And also, just one more thing, I think behind us is a very famous fortress as well. It's the St. Peterson Fortress. And I think we're talking about when St. Petersburg was built, that was the very first architectural phenomenon that was built in the city in the 1703?
Exactly, 1703 is when the city was established, and apparently the original idea of a Russian Tsar, we don't say king, we say Tsar, like Caesar, Kaiser in Germany.
Okay.
So Russian Tsar Peter the Great, or Peter the First, had an idea of building a naval base in the delta of this river. A naval base and an army base, and they picked that particular island, which is a natural island in the middle of this river, for a fortress. And it took about a year to build, but about 9 years after, capital moves Moscow to where we are now. And just imagine what kind of capital it was.
Yeah.
The population of 4,000 people, mainly sailors and soldiers, and it grew up to be the second city in the Russian Federation.
Wow, yeah. So I think we'll keep on going. We'll walk over to have a closer look at the Winter Palace, which is one of the signature buildings. It's a must-see if you're here in St. Petersburg. And we're just walking down this bridge. And the weather today it's amazing, I have to say, because we landed yesterday and it was a bit grey and it was a bit rainy. And I think I was asking you earlier if this is the kind of weather you have every day.
This is actually pretty unusual because Lonely Planet says that St. Petersburg has 26 cloudless days a year. Apparently this is one of the 26 cloudless days. Well, Lonely Planet should be trusted, of course, but honestly it rains a lot here in the summer. Well, the weather is changeable. When it's sunny, that's exceptional, and yeah, it is. Yeah, it's beautiful today.
So I think we're very lucky. I think they must have known that we were doing a live here in St. Petersburg, so St. Petersburg definitely put on the best show for us today.
Definitely.
Yeah, so we're just walking down this bridge, and all around us in St. Petersburg, I think there's over 4,000 monuments and architects which are protected, and this specific place, which is the city centre of St. Petersburg, is actually also protected by UNESCO. So there's a lot of building around here that's, I mean, how old is most of these buildings?
Well, you just mentioned UNESCO, and the reason why St. Petersburg was put on the UNESCO's heritage list is it's not really that this city has something like Sagrada Familia, right, or the Barcelona or the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
It's the consistent 18th, 19th century architecture. Well, you can walk for miles here in St. Petersburg, and everything you'll be looking at will be at least 100, 150 years old. There's always been a law that prohibits modern construction in certain areas, so we don't have skyscrapers. Oh, now we do. We have one, but it's away from the city centre. It's actually right. Well, we can't see it from here, but there's almost no modern buildings in the historical centre, unlike any other place in Russia.
Yeah.
And this law was passed by Peter the Great himself, so you know there's a lot of respect for history in Petersburg.
So even in the 18th century?
Yes, it's more than 300 years old, this law. Well, it's possible to build something modern in the historical centre, yet the developers must make sure that the facade fits in, that it looks, and very often you can't tell the difference. You can see a building that is 5 years old, but it looks like an 18th century palace. And it's, yeah, that's always been very distinctive feature of the city.
No, I think it's great, and that's why today we have so many amazing buildings that we can basically pass on to the next generation and to learn about the history of St. Petersburg. And I think it's what everyone should really, or the cities kind of should learn from, to keep the city as it were.
Intact.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I had when we were walking around St. Petersburg this morning, everywhere is walkable, but I think I was reading up on the websites, and they recommended also taking the underground, the metro or the tube, because it's one of the deepest tube systems in the world.
Well, it's actually debated. There's the biggest rival in terms of the depth of the metro is actually Kiev, the Ukraine. Well, they claim to have the deepest in the world. Well, it is quite deep because in Kiev it goes under the river Dnieper. But St. Petersburg is about 70 meters deep, which makes it, well, one of the deepest. Metro in St. Petersburg is the second oldest in this country. Moscow is the oldest, St. Petersburg is the second oldest. Some of the metro stations are very pretty, especially the ones that, the oldest ones that date back to 1950s. What they're building these days is just functional, but still people have a lot of respect for the metro. For instance, there's no graffitis, there's no litter. You can very rarely see a passenger having a snack or, you know, a drink. People are just not used to it. Well, so there's no litter. There is, I wouldn't call it pristine, but it's very clean.
It's comfortable.
Yeah, it's comfortable. In my opinion, it's actually a great idea to step down into the metro, because this is where you can see real life. You can see people actually reading books, because not everybody is with their mobile phone. You can see young kids, with a normal book, something hard on paper. Young people are quite cautious as well. It's very customary to offer a seat to an older passenger, and it's always been like that. And this is how St. Petersburg has a specific city culture, and the good of it doesn't really change, and it's passed on from generation to generation.
So I think it's in the DNA of St. Petersburg.
Have been selling St. Petersburg's metro well enough.
No, so it's definitely in the DNA of St. Petersburg, because it's known as the cultural capital of the world, because you do have a lot of famous artists, poets who basically came here. And I think we're just coming up to the Winter Palace, which is also designed by the famous Italian architect. Yes, so I'm probably going to get the name wrong. It's Francesco Bartolomeo Restoratti.
Exactly, Francesco Bartolomeo Restoratti.
So now that we're here, we're on the west facade of is this the west side of the Winter Palace?
This is the west side of the Winter Palace, yes.
And sorry to our audience, it's very touristy here, so it's quite noisy, but you can see there's a lot of buskers and a lot of culture here, so it's actually really fun. But is this the busiest time of the year for tourism? Or?
The busiest time of the year, yes, it is now. It's called the White Nights, and the White Nights Festival is the 50 nights, starting on May the 25th and up to July the 15th. So this is the time to visit if you want to be a part of this festival. The city doesn't sleep. It's a 24-hour party, yes, that's right. That's why the Bosques are here for.
So you can fit a lot of events in, a lot of activities in. So now that we're here, would you like to kind of give our audience a bit of history about the Winter Palace?
Well, for some reason, the Tsars here in St. Petersburg like to give two unusual names to their palaces. Summer palaces and winter palaces.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would stay in the summer palace in summer only, or in the winter palace only in winter. What we have in front of us here was built for the Romanovs, for the Romanov family, and the first member of the Russian royal family to really start using it was Catherine the Great. Peter the Great's daughter, Elizabeth. Yes, exactly, Elizabeth. But then, when her successor, Catherine the Great, came in, she started doing something else. She was a great art admirer and collector, and she placed some of the personal items of her collection in the Winter Palace. Then more space was built, primarily because the collection was expanding. Yeah. And one of the houses that we can't see from where we are now, but it sits right next to the Winter Palace from its eastern side, was built for Catherine as a private boudoir, and she called it Hermitage, or the Hermitage. And then eventually...
Is that how it got the name of the Hermitage Museum?
Exactly. This is how the art gallery got its name, from Catherine the Great's private house. What we have here from the western side, this is where the Tsars, the family members, the children, this is where they had their private quarters. Okay. So this is the western part. This is where, for instance, the last royal family, Nicholas, Alexandra, and their children, this is where their bedrooms would be. So that would look out onto this little square where we are standing at the moment. Actually has a specific name, a historical name. It's called the Winter Garden.
Oh, the Winter Garden.
Well, it doesn't look like a garden. There's a fountain, there's a bunch of trees, but originally it used to be fenced. And there was no admittance for the general public in here, and that was specifically for the Tsars to leave the palace and take a little promenade. Yeah. Well, and now it's just a normal public place.
That's so great. No, I was genuinely very surprised, because when I was reading up on the Winter Palace, I had thought that it would be fenced off and the public wouldn't be able to get this close to the building. Basically you can touch the building.
You can. Some people are sitting on it.
Exactly. And I think this is great to be so up and close and to see all the decorations. I don't know if the audience at home, they can see it, but it's so detailed, the colonnades, the decoratives, the golds and the green. But the thing is, I think it didn't always used to be this color, right?
No, it's the original color was yellow. Well, actually ochre, I believe. It's like dark yellow, yellow-white, and then it changed the color. It's been repainted more than once during the October Revolution of 1917. It was actually painted red, which is a funny coincidence because red October, you know, red color. About 25-30 years ago, it was blue and white.
Oh, blue and white.
It was blue and white, yes, and it's been green and white probably since early 90s, late 80s, early 90s.
And now we're walking up to this is the front side, the main entrance, right? So
this is the main entrance, yes. The main entrance is from the Palace Square, that is the main city square in St. Petersburg.
So I think to our viewers at home as well, we're going live on YouTube, on Twitter, and our CGTN app, and also Weibo. And if you have any questions about any of the places in St. Petersburg or about the Winter Palace, please leave your comments here or down here in the comment boxes. And we have Mike, who's the expert here, who can help answer some of your questions, and hopefully you'll be able to come and visit St. Petersburg as well. And so we'll keep on walking along here. I think here's 200 meters. How long is the building? 200 meters or
232 and a half.
That's pretty big. And how I would never know, so I'm not going to get a tape measure, but I mean, how many rooms or how big is the floor plan? Because we're talking about how long would it take, for example, me to go through the entire Hermitage
Museum?
Museum?
The Winter Palace is not the only section of the Hermitage.
Okay.
It actually consists of 6 different buildings. Well, the Winter Palace, and then coming up next is what is called Little Hermitage, and then the Old Hermitage, the New Hermitage, the Hermitage Theatre. That makes it 5, but then across the square there's another very impressive building that is called General Staff. General Staff. Yeah, General Staff is the headquarters of the army, and General Staff building, half of it is now part of the Hermitage. So actually, it takes quite a while to see everything. Some of the guidebooks say it takes more than a month if you want to take a look at each exhibit for a minute. Nobody does it.
It's insane because I mean, today it's the Hermitage Museum is closed, so it's a Monday. But I mean, if we go inside the museum or we go into the Winter Palace, where should we go? What are the highlights? For example, if you only got a day in St. Petersburg, what should you do?
In terms of the time, well, it's actually possible to get an idea of the museum even if you have 2 hours. Well, you enter you enter through the main gate. Well, so the first thing that you're going to see is the Winter Palace, and you can do it. You can have an idea, like scratching the surface for maybe 45 minutes, 1 hour, and then you take a walkway because all these buildings are connected by walkways. This is the way they were built, so you don't have to leave the Winter Palace. Then you take a walk through to Little Hermitage and visit Catherine the Great's private quarters, and then you go to the Old Hermitage and the New Hermitage. This is where they have Italian masters, and once you're done with all that, and you can do it in a couple of hours, well, it's well worth leaving the main part of the museum and then you walk across the square to the General Staff building to explore the French Impressionist collections. And Picasso is there as well, and Van Gogh. It's not just the French. There's a couple of Russian guys like Kandinsky and Malevich, and some people actually prefer this General Staff building to the historical parts of the museum.
Yeah, because I read that there's a huge art collection as well here. I mean, you have collections from Rembrandt, and you mentioned Picasso, and so Da Vinci and Michelangelo.
In the main part of the museum, Rembrandt and Rubens, Van Dyck, Raphael is there as well. We have talking about Leonardo, I believe we only have two paintings, or 2 or 3 paintings by Leonardo. Well, but this is where they are.
So I think this is the grand entrance, and we can see this is quite different to the west side that we just walked past.
That's right. It actually has 4 different facades, 4 completely different facades.
And was that the original design to have it, when you look at the building from different sides, to have a different feel, or?
The original design was very Baroque. That's this is what they call the style. Yeah. And Baroque is not uniquely Russian. It came into Russia from elsewhere, from Italy. There was a fire in the 1830s, a very bad fire, that and after that the palace had to be rebuilt. Well, so talking about how original the palace looks, well, there's been some alterations made, of course, after the fire, for instance. Yeah.
It's when you're here, it's very impressive, and you can see behind us as well. We're here at the Palace Square, and I think we have a lot of questions asking what is that column right in the middle. So
it's a monument to one of Napoleonic wars, the Patriotic War of 1812, and Russia was victorious, and Napoleon, by the way, Napoleon never made it to St. Petersburg, but he did make it to Moscow, and the emperor who was in power back then in Russia was Alexander the First, a grandson to Catherine the Great, and when Napoleon's army left this country, or was made leave, this monument was built in the main square in St. Petersburg. It's called Alexander's Column, because the statue up on the column, which represents an angel holding a cross, or holding on to the cross, has facial features to the Russian emperor. This is actually Alexander. This is what the emperor looked like.
wow.
Well, it's hard to tell from here, but if you have binoculars, well, you can tell this is exactly what the emperor looked like. He's also kind of there's a serpent, there's a snake under his feet, so he's actually stepping onto a snake that you can only see if you take a helicopter. Well, and the snake stands for a defeated enemy. An interesting detail about this statue, why it made it into all the guidebooks, is it's held by gravity alone. It's never been attached to the podium. It just sits there.
And it's safe?
So far so good. It's never been bolted down into the podium, and for 1830s, I believe, this is when it was built. It was like an engineering wonder, how well calculated it was. The funny thing is that Napoleon was French, but the monument was designed by French architect as well, Auguste Montferrand, who in fact is one of the greatest architects who ever worked in St. Petersburg.
It is the monument.
It's a solid piece of granite. Well, so one solid piece of granite that sits on the podium and has
near the
siamo qui